we go. So anyway, good morning, everyone. Tom, the People Conductor Black here. I'm with a wonderful gentleman, a new friend of mine, an associate. I'd like to call you the middle class millionaire maker, Joe Sugg. Would that be okay?
That's fine.
Awesome. Well, if you would, Joe, if you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, you know, how you're bringing value to the marketplace, and you know, you've shared a little bit about your story, and I'm very excited to learn more about it.
Yeah, just went ahead and invited some friends here. Yeah, Tom, we were talking a little bit about Middle Class Millionaire and just where it came from, what it is, and really what it comes down to is, as a former high net worth financial advisor and somebody who's done pretty well in real estate, I have been in business coaching and financial consulting now for probably close to last 15 years in some way, shape, or form. And when you start looking at where things are at, Middle Class Millionaire is really designed to help people understand the inefficiencies that they have in their own portfolio and know the opportunities that are in the market right now for them, and really to capitalize on those inefficiencies and turn them around. So I believe that most people don't understand all the opportunities they have. I believe firmly that everybody is a business owner, and you are either running your business well, you're running that sucker okay, or you're running it into the ground. And most people honestly are running their business into the ground because they don't even know they're in business. And that's a real problem.
Right. Well, you know, and to that point, I've heard that mentioned and said in so many words a number of times. So would it be safe to say that sometimes people say, well, you know what, I want to leave a job and I want to start a business, and then the business ends up running them because they never plan it out?
Well, you know, I think that's part of it, but the reality is that even if you don't have a quote unquote business, so I think that a lot of people get confused and they think that I'm only a business owner if I have a franchise business or I have some sort of a separate business outside of my 9-to-5 job. And you know, when you start looking at that aspect of how you see it, the reality is that, you know, everybody has a family office. They have a family business that they are running on a daily basis. If you think about it, what makes a business? Okay. You have your income and you have your expenses, right? Sure, now, every family has income and expenses. We all have the things that we're juggling on a daily basis. We have the different providers that we're working with. We have different people that we're dealing with. And if we are not functioning as a business, then we're probably missing out on some opportunities.
And to that point, you know, we can look at all those things like, you know, Xfinity is a vendor, and your AT&T cell phone is a vendor, and you have a bank account, and maybe you set up some online bill pay. So it's interesting that you put it that way, and you're right. I think when you said that most people don't realize that everyone is in a business, whether it's their business of their family, which includes income from their 9-to-5 and money that's outgoing. You said you want to help people with some of those inefficiencies, and so you're looking to take your financial planning background and help other people.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the reality is that when you start seeing where the inefficiencies are, all of a sudden it kind of starts hitting you. You know, you're going, wait, I have some tax inefficiencies over here, or I have some time inefficiencies over here, or I'm not capitalizing on things that I have right in front of me. And what that really creates is what we refer to as a transfer of wealth. And so, you know, a lot of times people are transferring wealth unknowingly, and in most instances unnecessarily, to somebody else. And that's a problem, that if you aren't sure where your inefficiencies are, then you're going to definitely be giving that money away to somebody else. And when you're giving money away, what you're doing, it's not about the money itself, it's about the expansion opportunity. And so much of what is being taught out there, if you think about from an economic standpoint, you have a contraction in the economy and you have an expansion in the economy. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so when you start looking at that expansion versus the contraction, then, sometimes we are implementing strategies and we're implementing processes in our own personal business that causes our business to contract. And that's where we start feeling the pressures of life. And that really comes into play with cash flow and, having not enough cash flow because we've contracted all those things around us and we're not paying attention to what's important.
Right. And I think one of the things that, I'm not going to get this quote correctly, but, the thing is that if we want true freedom, we either have to spend less or make more, but it's always great to do both.
Well, and you think about that even from a business perspective. I mean, right? There's only two ways to grow the value of your business. You can either cut expenses, and that puts money right to the bottom line, which increases the value of your company, or you can increase revenue. And so that's what you're talking about there is you can cut expenses or increase revenue, and there's only so many expenses you can cut before you can actually you're stuck. And so you've got to learn to increase revenue.
Right. And as part of what you're doing, because you said that when we were exchanging some private messages the other day, you said that one of the things that you'd like to do is help 10,000 or more people become middle-class millionaires. And it sounds bigger than it is. And what it seems to me from what you've said and what you've told me so far, that with some changes in these inefficiencies and some improvement in cash flow, anybody can be on a track for that possibility in their lifetime. Am I right?
Well, I think it's not even a lifetime issue. It's a reality that most people don't even understand how straightforward it is to achieve these goals because they have been conditioned to believe that these are lifelong goals. And so even with what you just said, in their lifetime, they can achieve this. And so most people believe that, if I could just get $1 million, that'd be awesome. That's like they would love to have just $1 million. And here's the problem with that thought process. First of all, when you set goals, when you set targets for like a lifelong stretch, you are guaranteed to have multiple things that come at you and direct you away from that. There are obstacles in life, right?
Sure.
I do a lot of off-roading, and I do a lot of things where I try and get in my Jeep and I crawl over big obstacles and things that are in the way of the trail and things that are holding me back. And you have to stand back and you say, okay, how can I overcome this obstacle? Well, if your goal is $1 million, well, think about it from this standpoint. If you have $1 million goal in your lifetime, Tom, what is your overall what is your, and I apologize, I've got a phone that I.
Oh, no worries. I have dogs, so if you hear dogs, that's what I have.
Exactly. Well, my dog is too old to bark anymore. But the speaker is going here. So when you start looking at the $1 million from an endowment standpoint, endowments look at a traditional 4% distribution. Okay, so if you're having a 4% distribution without touching the principal, then to gather in inflation and all the different components, on $1 million, that's only paying you $40,000 a year when you're looking at your gathering your money in retirement or financial freedom or whatever you want to call it. And so a $40,000 income, I don't know about you, but that doesn't get me real excited. That doesn't cover a lot of expenses. And so when you start talking about middle class is defined as $40,000 a year to $150,000 a year, or roughly $1 million to $4 million in assets that are kicking off roughly 4% of income.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. And again, one of the things, and we can get into this more now or later, because I've actually set aside a significant chunk of time for us, which means you can go as long as you want to go. But you had mentioned real estate. One of the things, or can you tell me a couple of things that if someone were to say to you tomorrow, hey Joe, I'd really like to get on the path to become a middle-class millionaire, what would be some of the strategies or even some of the things that they can do to possibly increase their cash flow that you think would make sense for someone who may have a full-time job?
Well, if they have a full-time job, that isn't that's not a down thing. That's not a problem. Most people think, well, if I have a job, I can't grow, and that's not reality. Obviously, when you're talking about your plan in general, whatever that is in your business, income is part of that, right? And so
Sure.
sometimes people are making more money in their job than they could otherwise, and that's not a negative thing at all for them.
Right.
With that said, it's more about how you're structuring your time. And at some point, if you have more upside available in a different opportunity than you do with somebody paying you for your time, because that's really all a job is.
Right.
Somebody is giving you a transfer of cash for a transfer of time. And when you start saying, okay, if I'm giving 40, 60 hours a week and I'm gaining whatever your income is, $100,000 a year, $60,000 a year, $200,000 a year, then all those things factor into when it makes sense to not do that anymore, or where you could potentially generate income. With that said, to answer your question, I think the first thing that I look at when I talk to people is that you have three aspects or three phases of growth. You have an equip phase, you have an expansion phase, and then you have an endowment phase. And what I find more times than not, I think you and I have talked about this a little bit, but from where I come from, I have what they call effed up values, Tom. That my effed up values are faith, family, friendships, financial freedom, and fun. And, those are my effed up values. And that's
Right.
how I filter everything through that lens to say, if it doesn't fit in those values, then it's probably not a good fit for me. So the first thing I would tell somebody is, what are your values? What is it that's important to you? And that's where you've got to start. The second thing is you've got to equip yourself for growth. So if you don't know where to start, invest in yourself. Invest in where you want to go. Invest in what you want to do. Understand that it's not a waste of money. I can tell you I spent way more money than I probably should admit, but I've probably spent well into the six figures on education. When you start looking at not only the cost of paying somebody to train me, schooling, all the different things that you have to go through, you realize, well, I've spent a lot of money in learning what I know and gaining the experience that I have. And you're probably going to have to as well. And that's okay. There are ways to cut and trim that corner if you can find other people to mentor you, to coach you, to step into that. That's going to be a huge time saver for you.
Right.
And then, when you start looking at endowments and expansion and endowments, well, endowments is really just giving back. Right? I mean,
Right.
It's about giving back to somebody and paying it forward. And that's what an endowment is. Well, the problem that most people have is they start an endowment because they have good hearts. I would say most people have good hearts. Most people that I come across, their goal, their desire is to help people, to make a difference in their church, to make a difference in their lives of people around them. But they start there, and so what they do is they cut the legs out from under themselves on the expansion phase because they skip. And so you want to start with the equipping to say, okay, what am I going to get excited about? Do I get excited about affiliate marketing? Do I get excited about, e-commerce? Do I understand the internet? Is that part of what I do? Am I a multi-level marketing kind of a guy? I'm not personally, but a lot of people make a lot of money with that.
Right.
Real estate is something that I think everybody should understand. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. If you don't understand real estate, that's something you need to get equipped in. When you start looking at the market, have you ever heard somebody talk about the market? Well, there's a lot of markets, whether it's the stock market, whether it's which stock market,
Right.
whatever it is out there. But then you have to realize, okay, what if all the public stock market stuff is actually not all that's out there? Think about all the pre-IPO or initial public offering type things that are out there. And so I could go on and on. When I sit down with somebody, that's kind of a loaded question, because when I sit down with somebody, the first thing I want them to understand is their world is this, but what's available is this.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because a friend of mine, his name's Andrew. He's a friend and a mentor, and we have collaborated together in some areas. And he actually had done a Facebook Live training the other day, and he said that many people, most Americans, once they graduate high school or college, read an average of 1 to 2 books a year. And the average income nationally is roughly around 40 to 50,000. So let's just call it 48,000. Okay, that's the number I want to use. So the average American makes $48,000 and reads 1 or 2 books a year. The one percenters, the people in the 1% earning bracket in the country, they earn $480,000 a year or more, right? And they read an average of 5 to 10 books a month. So when you talked about education, that's really what it is that some people will go through high school or college and they'll get a job and maybe they make it into a career, but they stop expanding, and that's expanding their mind. So when you're not expanding your mind and you're not educating, it's hard to expand your net worth. Would that be a safe assessment?
A month.
What's that?
I pushed the wrong button. I'm sorry, Tom.
Oh, no worries. So anyway, I just found that was an interesting statement in that, you can order Audible. I pay $14.95 a month for Audible, so I can listen to books. I'm listening to a great book by Dr. David Schwartz called The Magic of Thinking Big. It talks about what you speak, what you say out loud, what you put out into the universe. It creates a subconscious impetus for negative or positive. So if you say bad things and I'll never make it and I'm sick, and your subconscious mind kind of works with you and said, well, you know what, I'm going to help you stay broke and sick. I'm going to help you stay sick and tired, because that's what you speak into existence. And, it even goes one step further. One of the things that we were talking about earlier is the power of prayer. And, I don't know how people live their spiritual lives, and I'm not here to judge that. But when you pray out loud and when you say these things out loud, whether you're praying for a family member or a friend, there is a lot of power for that in your own subconscious mind. And so I always try and think, how can I behave in a way that's going to put me on a better path? And I think that reading and listening to audiobooks is a great first step.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you have a psychology background. I believe I saw in your profile. My wife is a licensed clinical social worker, so she does a lot of therapy and mental health work in her private practice. And through the different science with neuroscience that's out there, it's really amazing. And you mentioned faith. I'm obviously it's one of my core values is faith. And I find it amazing how God has created us to have so many intricacies. And I believe sometimes people misunderstand that, there are ways that we can work with his creation, the way he's created us. And the mind is one of those things that works that way. Celia, my wife, she talks a lot about how when you have to start by actually having faith, and faith is the evidence of things unseen. And so you have to start by faith in something, right?
Right.
Whatever that is, it's faith in something, because otherwise you lose hope. And if you don't have hope, then you have no way to move forward. And so when you start talking about how to have your mindset focused right, it really is a core element that for success is you have to say, okay, I have to recondition or reprogram my brain to understand that I can win. I believe I can win. And if you don't believe you can win, you have to start creating positive associations that allow you to continue moving forward one step at a time.
Absolutely. And there are tons of cliches out there. It's like, if you can conceive it and you believe it, you can achieve it. And there are thousands of them out there. And, you and I both very much have a heart for service. And I know you had mentioned that, about 20 years ago, you were a pastor, and, my wife and I have gotten more active in our local church, and, it feels good from a giving perspective, but we both have a heart for service. And the reason I mention that is Zig Ziglar, who is one of the best sales trainers ever in the history of mankind, at least in America, was also a man of faith. And he talked about one of my favorite quotes of his: when you help enough other people get all that they want out of life, you will get all that you want. And it's obvious to me that you've helped a lot of people in a lot of ways throughout the course of your life. So you're living in an abundant, joyful, and grateful space. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you, because I'm grateful that we're having this time together right now, because I think it's awesome.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. So can you tell us a little bit more? I'd really like how you mentioned, our family, whether we have a job, whether we have a business, whether we're doing direct sales or multi-level or affiliate marketing or real estate, no matter who we are as a family or an individual, you are a business. If you're earning income and you're paying bills, you have a business, income and expenses. And I've never really looked at it that way. And so there's a little mind shift for me, because I've been self-employed for a long time, but I've also taken on projects as an independent contractor and things like that throughout the course of my life. And, my wife has a full-time job that she enjoys. So one of the things I wanted to find out, and I know some of what you're putting together is a work in progress. How could someone, or what would you want someone to bring to the table in order for you to, kind of open up their world and see how you might be able to add value?
Well, I think that the journey that I have been on has been one where when I was in financial services a decade ago, the minimum client that I worked with had $1 million net worth. And so we're literally talking about middle-class millionaire being $1 million. And you mentioned earlier that that's kind of people's target. That's something that people are trying to get to. And the reality was that was the lowest net worth that I was able to work with because of so many of the strategies. And so there's lots of things that go upside from there as far as opportunities and what to do. The challenge for me has been to take a step back and say, how do I get somebody from zero to there? Now, obviously, the more that you have in the way of resources, whether that's financial resources, whether that's intellectual resources, whether that's relational resources, the more you're going to be able to accomplish faster. But anybody can achieve goals if they're driven and they understand what to do. We talk about scripture a little bit, and there's the parable of the talents. And, I say this a lot, and this is probably one of those things that may or may not be that popular, but the reality is this: we live in a society that has said, well, we're all created equal. And while I believe strongly that we are created equal from equal opportunity and equal rights, we are not created equal necessarily. And the reason why that's important is because what happens is we start comparing ourselves to other people. And even in the parable of the talents, the parable of the talents said that there was one that was given 1 talent, one that was given 2 talents, and one that was given 5 talents. And so, you may or may not have everything the next person has. You may or may not have the calling to accomplish whatever somebody around you has. But that's really not the most important thing. The most important thing is stewardship of what you do have, and to take that step and move forward. And if you're willing to take those steps, we live in the United States. Now, I don't know how broad your audience is, if you're worldwide, but especially with the internet and some of the things that are out there, really the level of the playing field has gotten much more level across the country and across the world, to where just about anybody can succeed anymore if you're willing to put in the effort and willing to put in the energy. Right. It's going to be harder the less you have, but you can do it.
And it's interesting that you say that. We had mentioned about reading and expanding your mind and education. Obviously, that's really, really important. And a lot of this stuff starts at home, and some people who may feel like they don't have that equal footing maybe didn't have a role model. And there are a lot of things that you can learn on YouTube. You can, like I said, I can order audio books. There's a lot of ways that you can do that and expand your mind and learn new things, new skills, and things that can help increase your income without spending a lot of money.
Here's one thing I would say to that, if you don't mind me interjecting.
Sure.
Yeah, I find that a lot of people are looking for the next free opportunity for education. And while I agree 100% with you that those are out there and take advantage of everything that you can, one thing that I learned along the way, here's a little lesson I learned the hard way, and that is that there are a lot of things that get left out of those free educational pieces. And so even though they're free, and even though they kind of wade you into to low-cost opportunities, and I'm not saying all of them are this way, but I do understand the business of how these guys work, and they kind of ease you in little by little by little by little. And what happens is you spend a lot of money, and more importantly, you spend a tremendous amount of time. Tom, do you understand the difference between compound interest and simple interest?
Yes.
Okay, so when you start looking at compound interest versus simple interest is just the money you're getting year by year. Compound interest is you're getting interest on top of interest on top of interest on top of interest. And time becomes the factor there. And so what you're really needing to look at from an education standpoint is, how can I equip myself in the quickest and most efficient way to get forward. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to happen overnight. It's going to come together for you overnight. But what it means is that don't focus so much on the cost of the material, because if somebody gives you all the same material, but they give it to you over a 5-year period versus over a 5-month period, then your cost of that equipping, the cost of that education is actually very high, because we don't get our time back.
And to that point, Joe, one of the reasons I was saying that is, unfortunately, many people are doing nothing. And so, the most successful athletes, the most successful business people, they all have high-level coaches that they may pay, thousands or millions of dollars annually to keep them sharp. And there is no one who is extremely successful who hasn't had mentorship. And that's really the thing that that has helped me along the way, and it will certainly continue to help me. While we're just getting to know each other, I consider you a mentor now in my world, because not only are you a resource for knowledge and information, but just the way you present what you've experienced. It's easy for people like myself or other people to kind of have your message resonates with many, is what I'm getting at, and I like that.
Well, I hope so. I think that you mentioned mentors. Obviously, you don't get anywhere in life without mentors. I think that I know that some people knock different generations and whatever. I'm actually a fan of like the millennials. And I think part of that, you mentioned I was in ministry 20 years ago. You think about it, the people that I was a youth pastor over, they're all the millennials. And
Right.
those are my people.
Right.
They're people I understand. And I think that what, you find more times than not is that society has lied to us. And, we can talk about all the lies of society over and over and over again. But, one of the lies is that, somebody's trying to take advantage of you. They're trying to get you. They're trying to, do whatever. And, I can tell you that even after all the success that I had through 2010 in financial services and everything else, before I lost my business in the crash. And I can tell you that if you are finding a mentor, you're finding somebody and they haven't gone through something personally, they're just acting like, oh yeah, it's all great and it's all, bullfrogs and butterflies. It's no problem at all. Well, I can tell you, life doesn't work like that. At some point, you've got to find somebody who has been able to dig through and get through the challenges. But when you start looking at after that whole process, what was the first thing I did? I gathered as much assets as I could. I tried to equip myself, but I understood where I wanted to go. I actually had the knowledge. I had the knowledge of what I wanted to do. So what I did is I went and I found a mentor that could actually help me get through that process to make sure I wasn't going to make a mistake, because I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. And so I went out and found a mentor to help me through the real estate process that I knew worked. I already knew how it worked, but I needed somebody to make sure I stayed out of the ditch. And that's probably the biggest thing I could tell you about a mentor is if you're finding a mentor, you need to find somebody who's been through it, understands it, and can keep you out of the ditch.
Right. And again, one of the things that I was talking to one of my friends and mentors, his name is Sam, he's in Chicago, and he mentioned that a lot of people keep on this hamster wheel of life and they keep on doing the same things over and over again, hoping they get different or better results. And of course, that's the definition of insanity.
Right.
And all I would love for some people to take away from today is you can start right now becoming a better version of yourself. And the only true change that can happen in your life is in the mirror. You cannot change other people. You can't necessarily change the market. You can have impact on other people. You can have impact on things. But when it comes to change, becoming the best version of yourself should be a daily activity.
Well, in life, the only thing that doesn't change is that everything changes, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, you have to understand that change is coming.
Sure. And you can get with the program and you can get on board or you can get passed by. And so that's why some people they'll see friends from high school or college that maybe weren't as talented, maybe not as intelligent, and they far surpassed them because they recognized opportunities. Maybe they recognized mentorship early on and they were able to parlay that and to transfer that into financial success, emotional, mental success, what have you. And so one of the things that I really enjoy, and I think I told you before, Joe, I've been doing some of these interviews because you're right. I think most people are good. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about our exchanges, your mission with the Middle Class Millionaire, which we really didn't touch on enough. How did that come about in your mind? Where did that originate? And what's the next step in that progression on how you can help a lot of people?
So 10,000 people at $1 million. That sounds like a lot. When I was, faith is obviously important to me. And so, that when I start filtering through things, for me, I feel a calling to help people. So you mentioned service and helping people, and it's something that inside of me is a driver. It's a driver to help people. And so, back more than a decade ago, I felt like in my quiet time that, I was supposed to help create a $10 billion endowment for Christian and faith purposes. And that was kind of the design, is $10 billion as a starting place. That sounds like a lot until you realize that the economy and everything that's out there is trillions of dollars. I mean, we're talking about, if you even look at yesterday, I was looking at some reports this morning. Yesterday was Cyber Monday, and there was a record set in sales for Cyber Monday that was $9.2 billion. And so, we're talking about in one day.
Right.
So we're not talking about crazy numbers. So, then the question was, well, how do you do that? And so, I had this, real complex scenario where I was going to gather this endowment, and it just didn't work out. The economy changed, a lot of things happened, and it didn't work out. And so the question is now, how do I move forward? Well, for me, I step back and evaluate what the opportunities are. I step back and evaluate what went wrong. How can I, prevent it from happening again? And then how do I move forward? And one of the things that I learned in my study of Scripture was that, we have all been given an amount of resource, and we have all been tasked to steward that resource, and 100% of it, we just steward it with an open hand, right? And if we try and clinch it, we try and grab a hold of it, we hang on to it, what we're doing is we're contracting, right? When you think about it, you're tensing up, you're kind of contracting, where when you release it and you say, okay, I'm going to manage this with an open hand. So for me, this whole process is me managing a $10 billion endowment with an open hand. And how am I going to do that? Through 10,000 money managers in their family offices at $1 million a pop.
Right.
That's the $10 billion.
Right.
So that's where that number came from. And I recognize it's completely outside of my own personal ability to accomplish that, but I don't really care. That's not I'm not designed to care about whether it can be accomplished or not accomplished. All I can do is say, this is what I feel like I'm supposed to do. This is the mission. This is the goal. This is the dream. Mm-hmm. If somebody is wanting to accomplish more than they want to do, I know the path. I can tell you the path. I can show you the path, but you have to be able to take it. You talked about cliches, and one of the cliches that's out there is that knowledge is what?
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. The reality is knowledge isn't power, is it? Because if you don't apply that knowledge, then it's nothing. It's just information. And so, we have to learn that there are only a certain number of people. Unfortunately, we have the 80-20 rule. Some people call it the 90-10 rule. Of people that will actually apply the knowledge and move forward. And so I don't know if somebody's willing to apply the knowledge, if they're willing to take that step forward. But coming January 2020, we're going to see how many of them are willing to grab a hold and move forward with it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Again, as I said to you, I'm probably going to wind things up here in a minute, but sure. What I wanted to find out, is there anything else that you wanted to share with everyone about the Middle Class Millionaire, websites, anything you have coming up that we might be able to kind of keep an eye on you?
Well, I think the biggest thing to keep an eye on right now is the Facebook page. It's at Joe Sugg MCM. is the Facebook page, and I'll have a lot of other things coming out.
Okay.
Here in the next week or so. We're going to start rolling out the website and the different pieces.
Okay.
Really, the official launch for Middle Class Millionaire is January, and that's where we're going to really kick this thing off and start to dig in and help people. But some of the things that people just don't understand, or they have been not given full information when it comes to everything from mortgages to daily investments to fill in the blank. And so you have to step back, and if you realize the opportunities that are there, I was recently speaking at an event, and I was talking to some people, and I was showing them a strategy with their mortgages, and they had come from a background where they had been taught. There's a couple of very popular financial teachers out there, I guess, coaches, trainers that talk a lot about the 15-year mortgage and completely getting out of debt and all the different things that are there. And when they step back, I tell people all the time, listen, I've got a calculator and a Bible, and those are the two things that I work off of. And you can show me where I'm wrong, and I'm willing to look at that and assess that, but I've got a calculator and a Bible. And we start looking at it and we say, okay, here's what the numbers are. Here's how they work. Here's what happens. All of a sudden you start going, okay, so wait, I'm actually less safe when I'm doing this, and I'm making less money when I'm doing this than if I do a different strategy that I just didn't even know existed. And I say, well, that's kind of how it works.
Right. And to that point, and I don't want to bog people down with terminology they may not understand, but I've been reading a lot lately. I'm actually reading a book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? And, there's different things called velocity banking and infinite banking. And there's a lot of different strategies out there that people could at least research and investigate. And
those are a lot of the things we teach in MCM as well.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. So very excited about that. Very excited about your upcoming launch. Definitely want to be a part of it any way that I can. Like I said, my service here, or one of the reasons that I'm doing interviews is because it gives me the opportunity to meet and exchange thoughts and ideas and philosophies with wonderful people like yourself. So this is I'm in the first time in my 53 years on the planet, I believe I'm the most joyful, grateful, and focused than I've ever been. And so it's just a matter of parlaying that into running the family business better.
Absolutely.
And so the timing of this interview is perfect for me because I'm feeling abundant and I'm open to it, and I'm not feeling scarcity at all. So anything else that you wanted to add right now, Joe?
Just thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and hopefully we've given some people some tidbits, and I look forward to connecting with everybody.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. I stopped the live stream. So I am going to stop the recording.